In the year 2241, the galaxy had become a place of constant conflict. Powerful empires ruled over countless worlds, expanding their territories with iron fists. Among them was the Scifi Empire, a vast civilization known for its advanced technology, endless fleets of warships, and ruthless determination. They had conquered hundreds of planets and crushed every species that dared to resist. But when they turned their gaze to Earth, a small, seemingly insignificant planet in the corner of the galaxy, they saw only an easy target. Earth, they believed, was weak. It was still a young world. Its people had only recently discovered space travel and were far behind the other galactic civilizations in terms of technology. The Scifi Empire's intelligence reports were clear. Humanity's defenses were laughably outdated. Their strongest weapons were nothing compared to the might of the Scifi fleet. Earth had no allies to speak of, and their space programs were still in their infancy. To the Scifi, Earth appeared to be a primitive world, ready for conquest. The Scifi fleet was commanded by Admiral Zorath, a brilliant strategist known for his cold efficiency. Zorath had led countless campaigns against weaker species, and this would be no different. He had no doubt that the invasion would be swift and easy. On his orders, the massive Scifi fleet, consisting of hundreds of ships, set course for the solar system. These ships were enormous, capable of laying waste to entire planets with their powerful weapons. The fleet moved through space with a terrifying purpose, its destination clear: Earth. The Scifi ships entered the edge of the solar system, and Zorath gave the command to send a message to Earth. A single transmission was sent. "This is the Scifi Empire. Surrender your planet immediately, or we will be forced to take it by force. You have no choice." Zorath leaned back in his chair, confident that this would be enough to force humanity into submission. The message would be received, and Earth's leaders would immediately comply, knowing they stood no chance. But what he didn't expect was the response. "This is your only warning. Leave." The message was brief, simple, and unexpected. There was no panic in the tone, no fear, just a cold statement, one that baffled Zorath and his crew. He thought it was a joke, a desperate plea from a species that had no understanding of what it was facing. The Empire had never been met with such indifference before. Zorath's face tightened in anger. How dare they respond like this? Did they really think they could resist? His fingers hovered over the console to issue his orders, but something gave him pause. He could feel the weight of something strange in the air, as if the universe itself was holding its breath. "Admiral," said one of his officers, "we are receiving no further transmissions from Earth. Their communication systems are completely silent." Zorath scowled. "What are you talking about?" "We tried to reach Earth again, but the entire system is dead silent. We can't get any readings on their communication satellites or military installations. It's as if they've disappeared." Zorath's eyes narrowed. This was no joke. Earth was still silent, and this made him uneasy. For a moment, he wondered if the humans had some kind of hidden technology that could disrupt his fleet's systems. But no, this was simply Earth. There was no way they could have anything that could match the power of the Scifi Empire. He quickly dismissed the thought. "Prepare for the invasion," Zorath ordered. "We'll take the planet in the usual manner. Their silence doesn't mean anything. They'll learn soon enough that resistance is futile." As the Scifi fleet closed in on Earth's orbit, Zorath felt a surge of excitement. The humans would not last long against the full force of the Scifi Empire, but little did he know, they were making one of the most critical mistakes of their conquest. The humans had given their warning, and that Scifi had ignored it. Soon, the invaders would learn that there was more to Earth than met the eye. And that was the beginning of a lesson they would never forget. As the Scifi fleet advanced through the stars, their ships grew closer to Earth's orbit. Massive warships, sleek and intimidating, loomed like shadows in space. The ship's engines hummed powerfully as they approached the planet, their weapons fully charged and ready for the invasion. On board the lead ship, Admiral Zoreth stood in front of the massive viewing window, staring out at Earth below. He could already see the swirling blue oceans and green landmasses. Soon, it would be his. But something felt off. Zoreth couldn't shake the strange sense of unease that had crept over him. Earth was just a small planet after all. It shouldn't be able to stir up such feelings. The humans had barely developed space travel, and their military was laughably outdated compared to the might of the Scifi. There was no way they could have prepared for this. Yet, when the fleet approached Earth's atmosphere, Zoreth noticed that something was wrong. There were no signs of resistance. No ships appeared on the sensors. No defense shields activated. There was no military presence at all. No signs of weapons. No movement from Earth's side. It was as if the entire planet was dead silent, like no one was even there. Zoreth frowned and turned to his communications officer. "Have you contacted Earth again?" he asked. The officer nodded, typing quickly on the console in front of him. "Yes, Admiral. We sent another message, but there's still no response. It's as if their systems are completely offline." Zoreth's expression darkened. Earth's silence was unsettling. He knew the humans had some form of communication systems in place, but nothing seemed to be working. No matter what they tried, they received no reply. He ordered the fleet to move forward anyway. "Prepare for landing," he commanded. "We'll take the planet whether they're ready or not." But even as he gave the order, a part of Zoreth began to wonder. Where were the humans? Why hadn't they fought back? Had they already given up? Or were they simply waiting for their doom to arrive? The fleet descended into Earth's atmosphere, the warships gliding smoothly through space. As they entered the planet's orbit, Zoreth's doubts grew stronger. Everything was too still. No cities appeared on the scanners. No military bases. No defenses. Just silence. It was as if Earth had been abandoned. Something wasn't right. Zoreth couldn't explain it, but he couldn't shake the feeling that Earth was waiting for something. He turned to his officers again. "Is there any sign of a planetary defense system?" he asked. The officer checked the readings and then shook his head. "No, Admiral. There's nothing. No weapons, no ships. It's like we're the only ones here." Zoreth felt his stomach tighten. This wasn't like any invasion he had ever led. Normally, when an empire's forces came close to a planet, the inhabitants would prepare for war. Even the most primitive species tried to defend themselves. Yet here, there was nothing but stillness. He glanced at the crew, who were growing uneasy. He could feel the tension in the air, but he pushed it aside. The Scifi Empire was unstoppable, and there was no reason to worry about a few missing signals. The humans were weak. The first wave of ships entered Earth's orbit, and the landing procedures began. As Zoreth watched through the window, he expected to see cities and industrial areas rising up below. Instead, the planet's surface appeared almost peaceful. The oceans shimmered, the land stretched out in vast plains and forests. It was beautiful, but the beauty felt almost too perfect. "Admiral," came the voice of the communications officer, breaking his thoughts. "We're still receiving no response from Earth. I've tried every frequency and signal. There's nothing." Zoreth's patience began to wear thin. He stood up, walking to the front of the room. "Set course for the capital. We will not waste any more time. This planet will fall under our control." The fleet moved toward Earth's largest continent. Their goal was to establish a stronghold, and from there, force the humans into submission. Zoreth was ready for the battle to begin. After all, the humans had received their warning. If they chose to ignore it, they would suffer the consequences. But then, just as the fleet prepared to descend closer to the surface, something strange happened. A single faint signal appeared on the fleet's radar. It was weak, almost as if it were coming from far away. But it was human-made, and it was the only signal the fleet had received in days. Zoreth turned to his officers. "What is that?" The officer quickly scanned the readings. "It's coming from deep within the atmosphere, Admiral. It looks like a transmission." It's faint, but it's there. Zorath stared at the screen. The transmission was simple, direct, and chilling. We told you to leave. It was the same message as before, but this time, something was different. There was no anger in the tone, just calm certainty. The message didn't feel like a threat. It felt more like a warning. Zorath stood still, staring at the screen, his mind racing. What kind of enemy was this? They had given only one warning. And now, as the fleet hovered over their planet, the humans had still not raised a single weapon. But that message, it didn't feel like a bluff. That Seltheri had made a terrible mistake. Admiral Zorath stood still, his eyes fixed on the strange message that had appeared on his ship's monitors. He had expected resistance. He had expected humans to panic, to try to escape or fight with whatever they could. But what he didn't expect was this calm defiance. A single message sent from Earth, telling them simply, "We told you to leave." There was no aggression in the tone, no threats. It was just a statement. It was as if the humans knew something Zorath didn't. The Admiral's confidence began to waver. He stared at the words on the screen, trying to make sense of them. The message was short, but it echoed in his mind. The silence that followed it only made it more unsettling. Zorath turned to his officers, his voice tense with frustration. "What is this? What are we dealing with?" One of the officers spoke, his voice shaky. "Admiral, we've checked all the systems. There's no sign of human military power. Their ships are nowhere to be found. Their planetary defense grids are completely offline. We've sent every communication possible." He paused, glancing at the screen again. "We don't understand. They're not responding as we expected." Zorath clenched his fists. No responses, no military, no signs of defense. This is ridiculous. I've seen entire species beg for mercy. And yet here we are with a planet that refuses to even acknowledge us. I don't care how quiet they are. We move forward regardless. The fleet continued its approach, but the unease was growing among the crew. It wasn't just the silence. It was the feeling that something was lurking beneath it, something that Seltheri didn't understand. Every instinct told Zorath that they should turn back, that this wasn't going to be like any other conquest they had ever attempted. But he ignored those warnings, determined to claim Earth. As they drew closer to Earth's surface, Zorath began to feel the weight of the situation. He had seen the way the humans had responded, or, rather, the way they hadn't responded. It was as if they weren't afraid, as if they had already made their decision, and were waiting for him to make his next move. Just as the fleet neared the outermost layers of Earth's atmosphere, a second signal appeared. It was even weaker than the first one. It wasn't coming from Earth's surface, but from somewhere high in the atmosphere. A faint, almost imperceptible wave of energy reached out, and this time, the message was even shorter than the last one. "Leave now." Zorath's mind raced. Who could be sending this? How were they able to communicate like this? There were no signs of any human technology that could explain such precise, direct messages. It was almost as if Earth itself was speaking. He ordered the fleet to stop. The ships hovered above Earth's atmosphere, ready to strike at a moment's notice. But Zorath couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. That something was monitoring his every move. "Admiral," came a voice from the communication station. "We're receiving interference. Our systems are starting to malfunction. We can't pinpoint the source." Zorath's eyes narrowed. "What do you mean?" "We have the most advanced systems in the galaxy. There's no way something from this planet could interfere with us." "I don't know, Admiral. It's like..." The officer hesitated. "It's like we're being shut down." The Admiral turned, his eyes flashing with irritation. "Explain yourself." The officer tried to adjust the controls, but his hands were trembling. "I don't know how to explain it, but our systems are being blocked. Our communications, our sensors, even our navigation. It's like we're flying blind." Zorath stood motionless, his heart pounding. His mind raced as he thought about their previous encounters with other planets. The Xelthari were unbeatable, unmatched in their power and technology. But here, on Earth, it felt different. There was something deeply strange about the situation. It was like Earth was alive, watching every move they made, aware of every word they spoke. "Admiral, there's something wrong," another officer said, his voice low and filled with uncertainty. "The fleet. We're not in full control anymore." The Admiral's eyes flicked back to the communication screen. The weak signal continued to pulse in the background. Then, another message came through. "You've been warned. Leave now, or you will not leave at all." Zorath felt a chill run down his spine. The voice was so calm, so matter-of-fact. It wasn't a threat. It was a promise. Suddenly, the lights in the ship flickered. The entire fleet began to shake, as if a powerful force had taken hold of the very fabric of their vessels. The ships began to drift, slowly losing their position in space. Zorath's heart raced. Something was happening. They weren't in control anymore. As the fleet struggled against the unknown force pulling at them, Zorath realized that Earth had no reason to fight with weapons. Earth's true power wasn't in its technology or its military. It was in something far deeper, something far more ancient. For the first time in his life, Admiral Zorath wondered if they had made a fatal mistake by ignoring the warning. Admiral Zorath's hands gripped the control console as his ship shook violently. The entire fleet seemed to be losing control, drifting aimlessly through space. The once pristine systems began to flicker and fail. The communication systems buzzed with static, and the navigation controls became unresponsive. The ships were no longer under their control. Zorath's heart pounded in his chest. This was not how an invasion was supposed to go. The Xelthari Empire was unstoppable, its technology superior to any species in the galaxy. But now, here he was, helpless. The quiet, peaceful world of Earth had turned into a trap they hadn't even seen coming. "Admiral," shouted the officer at the communication station, his voice filled with panic. "We're losing our grip on the fleet. The systems are failing across all ships. We can't maintain position." Zorath's mind raced. He had never experienced anything like this before. He had fought against countless species, but nothing had ever made him feel so powerless. "Get the systems back online," Zorath barked. "Now." But there was no answer. The ships continued to drift in space, unable to correct their paths. The once mighty fleet seemed like a group of helpless, broken vessels at the mercy of an invisible force. "Admiral, there's no way to regain control," the officer said, his voice trembling. "The interference is too strong. It's coming from Earth. It's like the planet itself is resisting us." Zorath stared at the planet below them. Earth had no defense systems. It had no weapons, no military presence. So, how could it be doing this? How could a simple planet make his fleet behave this way? He tried to calm himself, to think logically. He had to find a way to regain control. He had to continue the mission. Earth was not invincible. But the strange, unseen force that seemed to be taking hold of them kept him on edge. Suddenly, the ship's view screen lit up with a new message, once again from Earth. Zorath's fists clenched as he read it. "You were warned." There was no anger in the message, no threat. It was the same calm tone as before. It was almost as if the planet was speaking directly to him, as if it had already made its decision about what was to come. The ships continued to drift. The interference grew stronger with each passing moment. Zorath could feel the weight of the situation. The fleet was no longer in control, and Earth was not responding as expected. The humans had given their warning, and now, the planet itself seemed to be enforcing it. For the first time, Zorath wondered if they had made a mistake by ignoring the message. Earth was not like any world they had encountered before. He turned to his officers, their faces pale and worried. "Get the fleet in order," he ordered. "We must regain control or we risk losing everything. I don't care how strange this planet is, we will complete our mission." But as the fleet tried to regain its stability, the planet below seemed to grow more active. Strange patterns of light began to appear on the surface of Earth. It wasn't like anything Zoreth had seen before. The lights shifted and moved, forming shapes and symbols that were impossible to understand. It was as if the planet itself was alive. "What are those?" one of the officers asked, pointing to the strange lights on the screen. Zoreth squinted at the images. They were too precise to be random, yet they didn't appear to be any form of technology. They were not like anything that Scifi had ever encountered in their vast conquests. "They're not human," Zoreth said, his voice uncertain. "At least, they're not anything we've ever encountered." For the first time, the great admiral felt a knot of fear in his stomach. What was happening? How was Earth doing this? And then something incredible occurred. The strange lights, once scattered across Earth's surface, began to form a shape. Slowly, they came together, forming a massive image that covered the entire planet. The shape was difficult to comprehend, but one thing was clear. It was alive, and it was watching. The massive image of swirling lights seemed to respond to their presence, as if it was aware of the Scifi fleet. Zoreth could feel the force behind it, the weight of its power pressing against his ship. It was like being in the presence of something ancient and powerful, something that had existed far longer than the Scifi Empire could ever imagine. The officer at the communication station spoke, his voice barely a whisper. "Admiral, I think the planet is sending a message." Zoreth leaned forward, his breath caught in his throat. The lights were now forming words, but they weren't in any language that Scifi knew. They weren't even symbols or letters. The message was a pattern, an ancient language that resonated deep within the admiral's mind. The pattern was simple, but its meaning was clear. "Leave, or you will never leave." Zoreth's body went cold. This was no ordinary world. Earth was no ordinary planet, and whatever force controlled it, it was far more advanced than anything that Scifi had ever encountered. In that moment, Zoreth realized something. The humans hadn't been the real threat. The planet itself was the true power. Earth had warned them, and they had ignored it. Now, the planet itself was telling them to leave, or face consequences that Zoreth could not even imagine. The admiral's mind raced. What could they do now? How could they possibly win against something so ancient, so powerful? The Scifi Empire had never faced a challenge like this. The question now was simple. Would they listen to the warning, or would they push forward into the unknown? Admiral Zoreth's mind raced as the glowing message from Earth continued to pulse on the fleet's screens. He had heard many threats in his time as an admiral, but this was different. The words had not come from any human or machine. They came from the very planet itself. It was as if Earth was not simply alive, but conscious, a force that had been watching the Scifi fleet approach and had decided to make its move. The lights on the planet's surface shifted again, this time forming more intricate shapes and patterns. They seemed to vibrate with an energy Zoreth could not comprehend. His ships were still drifting, their systems barely functional, their connection to Earth seemingly controlled by an unseen hand. No matter what the crew did, they couldn't regain full control. They were at the mercy of Earth's mysterious power. Zoreth stood frozen, his eyes locked on the strange light formations. He could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on him. This was not a typical enemy. This wasn't a world that would kneel before the Scifi Empire. In fact, it seemed like Earth wasn't afraid of them at all. "Admiral," came the voice of his first officer, trembling with uncertainty. We can't continue like this. The fleet is powerless. We need to decide whether to press forward or retreat." Zoreth turned to face his officer, his face hard with determination. "We do not retreat." His voice was steady, though his insides were anything but calm. He had led countless successful campaigns, and retreat was not part of his plan. But a part of him, deep inside, was beginning to question everything. What if they were wrong? What if Earth was more powerful than they could ever imagine? "But Admiral," the officer protested, "this is different. There's something about this planet that we don't understand. The message, the interference. It's not normal. We have to reconsider." Zorath clenched his fists. The power and authority of the Scifi Empire had never failed them before. But now, this quiet, seemingly insignificant planet had thrown his entire command into chaos. It made no sense. How could Earth, a planet that barely knew how to travel between stars, hold such control over his fleet? The Admiral took a deep breath and turned back to the monitors. The light patterns on Earth's surface shifted once again, this time forming a series of symbols that seemed to pulse in time with the fleet's failing systems. It was as if the planet itself was speaking, sending out a warning, and perhaps a challenge. Zorath's gaze hardened. "We will find a way to defeat it," he said, though the words didn't feel as confident as they should have. The tension in the room grew as the crew exchanged uneasy glances. Then the voice came again. But this time, it was different. The tone had shifted from calm to almost gentle, as though it were trying to reason with them. "You were warned. Leave, and there will be peace." Zorath's chest tightened. This was no longer a simple message. It was an offer, a choice. Earth wasn't demanding their destruction. It wasn't calling for war. It was simply asking them to leave. The words were clear, but their meaning was even clearer. The Scifi fleet had a choice to make. His mind flashed through his experiences. Zorath had never encountered a race, a world, or a force that had presented such a simple, yet difficult, decision. Throughout his campaigns, the message had always been the same: conquer, destroy, or move on. But this time, the message was different. Earth was offering them a way out, a chance to avoid conflict. The fleet's systems were still down, and it seemed that Earth had every ability to keep them in place. But there was something oddly compelling about the message. Zorath had always believed that the strength of the Scifi Empire would prevail over any enemy, no matter the odds. Yet here he stood, facing a planet that seemed to speak to him in ways no enemy ever had before. The first officer spoke again, more softly this time. "Admiral, maybe this is a sign. Perhaps we're meant to listen. Perhaps Earth is telling us something we don't yet understand." Zorath's mind churned. The fleet was in no position to launch an attack. They were at Earth's mercy. But more than that, there was an instinct within him, something that told him that this wasn't a battle worth fighting. The humans had made their choice. They had made their warning clear. He turned slowly to face his crew. "We've always believed in the power of our fleet, but this is not a battle for us to win. We have seen the power of Earth, the power of its silence, of its message." He paused, his voice softening. "I will not risk everything for a fight that isn't ours to fight." There was a long silence. The crew was unsure, but Zorath's decision was final. They had come to Earth expecting an easy conquest, but the planet had shown them that things were far more complicated than they had ever imagined. And now they had a choice to make: to continue their mission and risk angering a power beyond their understanding, or to heed the warning and leave in peace. Zorath took a long breath and then spoke to the fleet. "Prepare to retreat. We are leaving Earth." The crew exchanged looks of surprise. No one had expected the Admiral to make such a decision. But as they began to move the fleet away from the planet, Zorath felt something in his heart, a strange mix of relief and awe. They had been warned, and for the first time in his life, he understood that some battles weren't meant to be fought. Earth had made its choice, and now so had he. Admiral Zorath stood at the command station, his fingers hovering above the control panel. The fleet was retreating, slowly pulling away from Earth's atmosphere, but his mind remained heavy with doubt. The message had been clear: leave now, or you will not leave at all. And yet, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was still waiting. The silence surrounding the fleet was almost unnerving. As the ships continued their departure, Zorath glanced out of the viewing window. Earth's blue oceans and green continents were becoming smaller and smaller, But even from this distance, there was an undeniable presence about the planet. It was as if Earth's very atmosphere was alive, watching the fleet's every movement. "Admiral," came the voice of his first officer, "we've cleared the danger zone. We're beyond the reach of their interference. The fleet is stable again." Zorath nodded, but he didn't feel the relief he had expected. The decision to leave had been difficult, but it felt like they had only escaped, not conquered. He had always believed in the might of his empire, in the unyielding strength of the Scifi, but this time, Earth had shown them something far more powerful than they could ever understand. "Set course for home," Zorath said quietly, "but keep your eyes on Earth. I have a feeling this isn't over." The officer glanced at him, confusion flickering in his eyes. "Sir," Zorath sighed, "we may have left, but Earth, it has a way of making you feel like it's still watching you. I've never encountered anything like it." He paused, shaking his head. "It's almost as if it's alive." The officer said nothing, but he nodded, understanding that there was more to the situation than they had initially realized. Earth was no ordinary world. It was something different, something beyond their comprehension. And Zorath had a sense that the planet was not done with them yet. As the fleet moved farther from Earth, the tension on the ships seemed to ease, but Zorath couldn't shake the feeling of unease. Something was off. It was as if the planet's silent warning had left an imprint on his very soul. He couldn't understand it, and that was what scared him the most. For the first time in his career, the Admiral felt vulnerable. Hours passed as the fleet traveled through the stars, but the feeling of being watched never left Zorath. He couldn't explain it. The Scifi Empire had conquered countless planets, defeated powerful species, and never once had they been made to feel like this. They had always been the ones in control, the ones with the power. But Earth had shown them that there were forces far greater than anything they could ever conquer. Then, something unexpected happened. A new message appeared on the screens. It wasn't coming from Earth, but from deep space. It was faint, barely a whisper, but it was there. "This is not your end. This is only the beginning." The words sent a chill through Zorath. They were familiar, eerily so. It was as if Earth was speaking to them from a distance, even though they were no longer in its immediate reach. Zorath's heart pounded in his chest. He had hoped the encounter with Earth was over, that they had escaped unscathed. But this new message seemed to suggest otherwise. The officer at the communication station looked up from his screen, his face pale. "Admiral, the signal is coming from the same source as before. It's still Earth." Zorath's jaw clenched. "How is that possible? We're too far away." "I don't know, sir," the officer replied, his voice shaking. "But it's like Earth has extended its reach. It's still watching us." Zorath's mind raced. How could a planet? No, how could the force behind Earth still be communicating with them from such a distance? He had seen civilizations with great technology, but none had the power to influence events across such vast spaces. Earth, it seemed, was a different kind of power altogether. "Prepare the fleet," Zorath said, his voice cold and determined. "We need to understand what this message means. We need to know if Earth is truly finished with us, or if this is just the beginning of something far greater." The fleet slowed, the ships hovering in space as they awaited Zorath's orders. The crew was on edge. The once clear and straightforward mission had become a tangled mess of uncertainty. What was Earth? What power did it hold? And more importantly, what did it want from the Scifi? As the minutes passed, Zorath remained in deep thought. He couldn't shake the feeling that they were not just dealing with a planet, but with something ancient, something that had been waiting for them. They had made the mistake of underestimating Earth. They had thought it was weak, a world ripe for the taking. But now, they knew the truth. Earth was not weak. Earth was alive in ways they couldn't understand. Finally, Zorath made his decision. "We are not going back to Scifi. Not yet. There is more we need to learn. There is more Earth is trying to tell us." The crew exchanged nervous glances, but Zorath's voice was firm. "Prepare to turn the fleet back toward Earth." The first officer's eyes widened in disbelief. "Sir, we can't." Zorath silenced him with a raised hand. "This is not over. We need to understand this. We need to know what Earth is truly capable of." The ships turned, heading back toward Earth's atmosphere. Zorath knew the risks. He knew that they might be walking into something far beyond their control. But he also knew that the fate of the Selthari Empire might depend on it. What was Earth really? And why was it still watching them? The answers, Zorath knew, lay ahead, and he would stop at nothing to find them. As the fleet made its way back toward Earth, Admiral Zorath felt a strange sense of unease. He had never been one to second-guess himself, but this time, he couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking into the unknown. The message from Earth had been clear: this is not your end. But the fleet's return felt like an invitation to something far more dangerous than they could possibly imagine. The ships moved slowly, cautiously. Zorath watched as the planet grew larger on the viewing screen, its deep blue oceans and swirling clouds now filling the entire window. The fleet's engines hummed, but there was an almost eerie silence aboard the ships. The crew remained on edge, unsure of what awaited them. "Admiral," the first officer said, his voice hesitant, "are you sure this is the right course of action? We still don't fully understand what Earth is. What if we're walking into a trap?" Zorath turned to face his officer. His expression was calm, but inside, his mind was full of questions. "We've come this far, and we need answers. We've underestimated Earth, and now we must face the consequences of our ignorance." He paused. "I don't think it's a trap, but I do believe Earth has something to show us." The officer nodded, though the concern in his eyes didn't fade. "Understood, Admiral." The fleet moved closer to Earth, and Zorath could see the strange lights on the planet's surface once more. This time, they were even more vibrant, more intricate than before. They formed patterns that seemed to pulse with energy, almost as if they were trying to communicate something far deeper than just words. As the ships entered Earth's atmosphere, Zorath felt an overwhelming sense of awe. He had been to countless planets, seen countless worlds, but none of them had ever made him feel like this. Earth was no ordinary planet. There was something alive here, something that seemed to resonate with the very core of existence itself. "Admiral," the communications officer said, her voice tense, "we're receiving another message. It's coming from Earth." Zorath's heart skipped a beat. He had expected this. Earth had made it clear that they were not finished with the fleet. But this new message was different. It wasn't just a warning. It was something far more powerful. The words appeared on the screen, this time in a familiar language. They were simple, yet profound. "We are not the planet. We are the force that guides it, and we are ready to guide you." Zorath's breath caught in his throat. The message was clear now. Earth was not just a planet. It was a force of nature, a force beyond anything that Selthari had ever encountered. But it wasn't just a force. It was something that had been waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. "What does this mean?" Zorath whispered to himself, his mind racing. He had never believed in things beyond the physical, things that couldn't be measured or understood by science. But now he was being forced to reconsider everything he had ever known. The lights on Earth's surface shifted once again, this time forming a massive symbol that seemed to stretch across the entire planet. It was a symbol of unity, of connection, and Zorath could feel its power from where he stood, millions of miles away. "Admiral," the first officer said, his voice trembling, "I think we've been wrong all along. Earth isn't just a world. It's a force, a consciousness. And it's been guiding us, teaching us, without us even realizing it." Zorath nodded slowly. "I see that now. We thought we were the superior force, but Earth has shown us that there is more to power than just technology. It's about connection. It's about understanding the balance of the universe." The communication officer spoke up again. There's more, Admiral. The message continues. The new words appeared on the screen. You have been tested. You have been warned. Now, the choice is yours. Will you continue your path, or will you join us in a new way of being? Zoreth's mind reeled. The message was an invitation, a challenge. Earth wasn't threatening them anymore. It wasn't warning them of danger. It was offering them something far greater, a choice. A choice to change, to evolve, to join in a greater purpose beyond conquest and power. The Admiral stared at the screen, his thoughts running wild. What did it mean? What did Earth want from them? What did it mean for the Scifi Empire? Admiral, the officer said, breaking the silence. What do we do now? Zoreth took a long, deep breath. For the first time in his life, he was faced with a choice that didn't involve war, conquest, or domination. Earth was offering them a chance to learn, to grow, to evolve into something more than just a military force. He looked around at his crew. They were all waiting for him, their eyes full of uncertainty, but also curiosity. They, too, had felt the weight of Earth's power. They, too, had come to understand that there was more to the universe than they had ever imagined. Zoreth stood tall and made his decision. We accept the offer, he said. We will join Earth. We will learn, and we will evolve. The Scifi Empire is not just a force of destruction. We are capable of so much more. As the fleet hovered in space above Earth, Zoreth felt a sense of peace he had never known before. The galaxy was vast, full of unknowns and mysteries, but for the first time, he understood that there were forces far greater than technology, forces that connected all life, forces that could guide them to something greater. Earth had shown them the way, and now, the Scifi would walk that path.